Evening, and this is the review for modules 5, 6, and 7. So with module 5 was the big hit was identification, hazard identification, and then the response needed for those hazards. So that hit on things of hitting specific hazards to your area. So for myself, being in the DC, Virginia area, my big thing was aviation. Having the big three airports made it really big for having an aviation hazard or a aviation mishap. So understanding having those resources that you're going to need, the manpower, and the logistics set up for that. And then from there we moved into module 6, which hit really big on the terrorist attack and civil disturbances. Make sure I get the verbiage right. And the all hazards approach to planning. So for the terrorist attack and civil disturbances, the main wicket for there was same thing. DC area was a really big potential for terrorist attacks, and then understanding the resources needed and what exactly that threat can be to that specific community, and same thing with the risks and the assessments as well. And then with the all hazard approach, I kind of went with I'd say less traditional approach of the all hazard approach. I looked at it from a business standpoint. So what I kind of hit on was, being a business owner, not being able to have the resources needed for every single little, possible emergency that could happen, and spending a lot of, time on something that potentially couldn't happen versus really taking the time to focus on something that, potentially could happen. If you're, working in a restaurant, focusing on things, like, obviously structural fires, dealing with fryers and things like that, or, some possible spills with, some of the chemicals that are used in there, whether it's cleaning supplies or cooking supplies, instead of dealing with, like a terrorist attack inside of, a Panera bread or something like that. The didn't seem to make sense for an all hazard approach for something like that. So that was kind of my take on it. It didn't really seem to fit with everyone else's, but that was what I got from that particular module. And then going into module 7, which is where we're wrapping up today, was the mass casualties and mass evacuations, hitting the functional annexes, and then the hazard specific appendices, unified command, and then starting the major project for the Liberty County community. So the big takeaway from this module for me was really understanding the functional annexes and the hazard specific appendices. I was having a hard time kind of wrapping around the vocabulary of everything. So this week, knowing that in module 9 that's going to be the major part of the project, I really spent the time understanding what that exactly meant. I stepped away from my Virginia EOP and then found a sample EOP for straight from FEMA, and it was a child care center EOP. And obviously, being from FEMA, it had the exact same vocabulary that is used in the SLG 101. So it made it easier for me to be able to reference back and make sure that there was no, I guess, language barrier, if you will. Going back to that Virginia one, there was just a lot of things that seemed like it could be the same, but because it wasn't called the same, it made it confusing. So I switched to this child care EOP, and I think that really helped. I was able to look at all the annexes and get the breakdown of exactly what was needed, and hopefully got a decent review of that. And then wrapping up with the Liberty County community of understanding, back into the hazard assessments, and then just understanding, their community profile and identifying their risks as we did back in module 5. Thank you.